Hello friends, namaste, blessed be, and welcome to this tutorial video on how to make Orgonite. We've been having a lot of fun making this together, my wife and I. Willow's on the camera.
Hi.
And people have been asking us how we make it, and so I thought we'd do a video and demonstrate it for you. So here we go. We're going to be making two different types of Orgonite. But first let's talk about what Orgonite is. Orgonite is made from resin, crystal, quartz, and layers of metal. The more layers of metal, the better. What it does is it takes negative energy, or energy that is in the wrong space. All energy is just energy, just in the right space or the wrong space. So for ease, we'll call it negative energy. It takes negative energy and turns it into positive energy. So you can have something like a cell phone tower that's or a computer or something like that that's emanating a harmful electromagnetic radiation into the surrounding area, and put Orgonite near it, and the Orgonite will transform that negative into a positive. So you can actually turn things that would be to your disadvantage to your advantage. So it's a very wonderful tool to use in our modern life, where we're saturated by all these waves. We're literally in a soup of all sorts of waves, radiations, positive, negative. Orgonite is your friend. Not only does it do that, but it's not only effective for electronic sources, but it's really effective for harmonizing your own energy field. We have a bioelectric field that we call the aura, and that can be various layers of harmonized. What Orgonite does is it takes little bits of your energy that may be scattered around haphazardly, maybe not necessarily shattered away from yourself, but it takes those little bits of errant energy and it harmonizes them and centers you right into yourself. And so you can experience this in increased balance, elevated mood. It helps with depression and other sorts of mood-related issues. It helps with health. It's just a really wonderful boon. All things positive come from Orgonite, can come from Orgonite. Not only from Orgonite, obviously. But let's see. So Orgonite was developed based on the research of Wilhelm Reich. He was a scientist studying orgasm energy under Sigmund Freud, and they're trying to figure out what it is, how they could quantify it, and so his research led him down the rabbit hole of discovering orgone energy, as he called it. Orgone is just another term for life force energy, the same as chi, prana, ki, all these sorts of things. Orgone is just what he settled on based upon the basis of his research. And Orgonite is developed out of that research. I'm going to be making two different types, like I said. I'm going to be making a beautiful piece for our friend Elizabeth Miller out of some treasures that she sent us. And I'm going to be using the clear casting resin, which is this. And this is from your local craft store. And it makes lovely, beautiful pieces like this. This is a water charging plate that I made for our house, or any kind of charging plate. This sits on my altar and serves lots of purposes. And then we're going to be making what we call tower busters, which are, I just made these earlier, that's why they're still in the pan here. These are purely tactical pieces using a cheaper resin. These are just made with the resin, metal shavings like this, quartz pieces, which we have here, just little busted up random pieces. Even for the nice ones, it doesn't have to be your prize crystal points. Any sort of quartz will do. And so we use the cheaper resin for these because this resin is $35 for a gallon. This resin is $25 for a little pint-sized thing. So since we're just throwing these typically out into the wilderness, well, at cell phone towers, water treatment centers, things of that nature. They don't need to be pretty, so we can use the cheap resin for these. They serve their purpose wonderfully, every bit as well as these. They just don't look very nice. This resin is really nice for the looking nice. It is good for the looking nice and the looking pretty, which we like. So that is what we're going to use. So yes, let's begin making Elizabeth's piece, and then we'll move on to the tower busters as this layer dries. So she's got a lovely little amethyst point that she sent. I'll just put it against this for... So it's a nice little, beautiful, rich purple point. So I thought that that would be a nice centerpiece for this dome we're going to be making her. In this lovely glass we got at the thrift store for $1, apparently. The grease pen's still on there. So we want this to be the centerpiece, and it's going to be centered right in there. But how to keep it straight up? Easy enough. I've taken a piece of cardboard, cut a hole in it that's the right size to house the amethyst. Cut a little notch in it so that you can pour the resin around it. And then I've cut a slit so that it's easy to peel off of it once it's dry. And this fits precisely in the middle there. Let's get this crystal in there right. There we go. So that the tip is touching the glass. So first we need to lubricate this glass. Just a little WD-40. You can use cooking spray, olive oil, any sort of lube that you have. Smear it around so that you don't have any rivulets or droplets, because that will leave you with a pitted surface. So we've got this, we've got our amethyst in there, so we can begin mixing our resin. So the resin comes in two parts. It's got the base and a hardener. So we're going to be pouring, and there's instructions for mixing the base and hardener together. After a while of doing it, you'll get a feel for how to guesstimate. I usually do about 20 drops per ounce, but really once you do it for a little bit, you'll get a feel for it, and it'll be a very intuitive process. So we've mixed the hardener and the base together, just using a piece of busted chopstick to mix it together. This little container comes on the top of these resin things. It's really pretty useful for mixing the resin. Mix it up really thoroughly. You don't have to be too fastidious about mixing your resin. This resin. Other resins you do have to mix. This type though, the cast in craft polyester, is very forgiving. You can use your judgment for mixing the hardener and stirring. So we're pouring it right in the slot here, and we're going to fill that almost up until where the cardboard is. Definitely don't want it to touch the cardboard, so let's make sure it's not, and it's looking good. So what this is going to do is this will take probably about 15 to 20 minutes to start to solidify to the point where it'll hold that amethyst upright, at which point we'll take that cardboard off and start from there. So we've got a little bit of extra in there, and I hate to waste it because it is kind of expensive. And so what I'm going to do is just start making a little pocket piece in one of these empty slots here. So lube, I'm just going to pour this right in there. It'll form a little pad to start putting things on. We'll put some rowan berries in here because, like we'll talk about later, 5 rowan berries in there. I like 5. Nice, a nice magical number. So rowan berries float. So I like to tack them down first. One of the things you'll want to consider when you're making these is that the laws of floating and buoyancy still apply. So when you use things like seashells, berries, pieces of wood, herbs, things of that nature, if it floats, it's going to float to the top of your Orgonite. So if you mix it in, even if you mix it in really thoroughly, those berries would float to the top. So that's why I put them in at this point on this piece that we're just making off the cuff is that once that layer solidifies, those rowan berries aren't going anywhere because the resin will be gripping it nice and solidly. So while Elizabeth's piece dries or begins to harden, we're going to start making some tower busters. These are really easy. They're really pretty fun to make, and get a lot of good out of them. Like I say, we keep a bag of them in the car so that when we're driving around, we can just say, "Oh, there's a tower. Let's pull over and gift it with some Orgonite. Help out the community, the animals, the nature, the water. It's just good for everybody." So we've lubed up our pan here, and we're going to next start putting metal into these little containers. This is some steel metal shavings that our friend Jordan hooked me up with. Thanks, Jordan. So we're putting a good amount. Like I say, you want the maximum amount of metal layers possible. It's all about the layers, because the layers are what magnify and re-emanate the energy. So we've got these pretty nice and full. You don't want to fill it too full because you don't want them protruding out of the top. We've got a bowl of crystals here, and they don't have to be your prize crystal points or anything. These are just pieces of random quartz that I broke off a big piece like this. We've got a lot of these big clusters. As long as you have a nice intention, the crystals don't mind being broken up. It's just when we tend to think of them as decorations that we get these reservations about breaking them apart. Thanks to my friend Peach Pirate Captain, aka Captain Crazybeard, for that little piece of information. Because for a while I was like, should I bust this up? Is that a kind thing to do? So I asked him, and he verified what I thought, which was that as long as your intent is good and it's for the good of all, then they are happy to be a part. And so here we go. First things to do with the crystals. Crystals are like little computers. They hold the energy of wherever they are. They hold kind of like a program. And what you want to do first is clear them. What I like to do is use Reiki. I hold them in my hands, and you can use, there's so many methods. You can sage them off, you can leave them in the sun, put them in the stream. You can probably, saging is probably the easiest for non-energy workers. But so I'm going to just ask them to clear all programs, please, crystals. Clear yourselves and ready yourself to be part of Orgonite. Your intent is really what will communicate your purpose to the crystals. And so once they're clear, I like to energize them with the thought of optimal blessings at optimal times to the fullest extent of your capabilities, for the benefit of all at all times. So I figure that's a pretty good catch-all blessing for a crystal. Leave a little bit of room for interpretation. Optimal blessings, however that may be. So I'm nesting these in here. Little bird eggs. And as you can see, coming together very nicely. This one, while there's quartz on it, I don't really want to, that one's not really speaking to me. I like for there to be some clarity to it. The purpose of the quartz is pretty cool. What happens is the resin shrinks, and as it shrinks, it squeezes the quartz. And as we know from things like watches and quartz technology, that when you squeeze quartz, it exhibits what we call a piezoelectric quality, which charges it with an electric charge. And that really serves to energize these and activate their properties, their Orgonite capabilities. So I've got these. I'm going to put in some kyanite, selenite, and celestite. to keep the quartz nice and clear. Just tiny little pieces of kyanite. I'm going to take, like, this is a pretty tiny piece, and I'm going to take this one and break it up a little bit. It doesn't take much, just a little bit will do you. Kyanite is pretty powerful stuff. It's one of the only stones, along with citrine, and I forget the other one, I think, but citrine and kyanite clear themselves and other stones that they're in contact with, so it's really wonderful for keeping the quartz nice and clear. Selenite is really good for keeping things flowing. I'm going to put a little bit of that in there as well. And blue celestite here is really good for connecting to higher source. I had a nice cluster of this that it's a really soft mineral, so you can break it up quite easily. Take some of that, sprinkle it in, and a little bit will do you too. I'm putting a little bit more than I need to in these. And so, top it off with a little bit more metal. Like I said, you don't want to get too much because you don't want it to be protruding out of the top. These are going to be really wonderful pieces of Orgonite with all this goodness. Like I said, all it needs really to be Orgonite is metal, quartz, and resin. So we could have skipped all that step with the selenite, the celestite, and the kyanite and been totally golden. But with this little added bit, it's going to make a big difference. So, let's see, those are looking pretty good there. So I'm going to set these shavings aside. I do like to use those sometimes in the clear pieces just because they give a really cool texture, especially combined with the BBs that we like to use in a lot of them. So, here we go. I'm going to use our fiberglass heavy-duty resin. You can notice I'm wearing an apron. I highly suggest you wear an apron when you're making this because this resin, if it gets on your clothes, you can just welcome that resin onto your clothing for the rest of the time that you own that garment, because it's not going anywhere. Also, you can see we're doing this outside. It's quite a stinky process and will smell up your house. So doing it outside is a great idea. But if you do it inside, it's perfectly fine. Just turn on some fans, open a window. And you might consider burning a couple of beeswax candles, because beeswax candles emanate negative ions which help draw out foul odors and chemical scents from the air. Little pro tip there for you. Now what I've got in this bag, I'm going to be adding to this. This is the same as this resin in that it's got two parts. It's got the base and the hardener. And what I have here are key shavings from the key making area at the hardware store. Every time I go there, I ask for their key shavings, which are just little bits of metal. So if you come in and get a good look at this, it's pretty neat. It'll, because like I said, what this is all about is trying to achieve as many layers of metal as possible. So that's a really fine metal powder, which will give you really terrible splinters if you're not careful, so I suggest not touching it with your bare skin. So stirring that in first before adding any hardener. Get it nice and solidified. A lot of people use purely powdered metal. They skip the step of using metal shavings in favor of just using powdered metal. Couldn't find any powdered metal, but even if I did, I think I would still use the metal shavings just because it feels good. A lot of people have talked about how you get greater distance with the metal shavings because it's a broader area that the energy is bouncing off of versus a tiny metal particle. So we've got that stirred in nicely. Let's set this chopstick aside here. And like with the catalyst for the clear resin, I just kind of got an idea after doing it for a little bit about how much to put in. The instructions are on the container. I generally err on the side of more versus less, just because I've had a couple of Orgonite projects that I didn't put quite enough catalyst in, and they don't come out of the mold very easily at all because they'll still be kind of sticky and tacky. And if you leave it out in the sun or in warm areas at all, it'll start to melt and ooze, and you can lose a lot of cool ingredients that way. So we've got that mixed up. Catalyst, key shavings, and the resin. So we're going to be pouring it in here. These pliers out of the way. Now as this dries, it's going to get really hot, like surprisingly hot. We poured these earlier, and I had Willow feel it, and it was almost so hot that it would burn you if you left your finger on there for longer than we did. So that's why we're doing it in metal containers. You want to do it in something that's not going to melt under the heat of the curing resin. Another thing to consider is that this isn't like paint or anything else like that that dries through a normal process. This is drying through a chemical reaction process, and so thickness doesn't matter. A layer a couple millimeters thick and a layer 2 inches thick will dry at the same rate. So that's another thing to keep in mind when choosing your molds, that thickness doesn't really matter, like how long it's going to take for it to dry. So you can see I'm giving these a nice coating. If you like, you can stir it up or whatever you... I feel like I've got my ingredients in there just so I feel pretty happy about not stirring it up. These are going to be awesome Orgonites, and we're probably going to be tossing these out of the car on our drive down to Hot Springs this weekend, where we're going to be participating in the moment and digging more crystals. Trying to get all the little tips covered and try to use up all of my resin. It looks like I did a pretty good job of guesstimating how much I'd be using. Love when that happens. Awesome, that's pretty dang perfect. I've got a little bit of a piece of metal poking up here, and these hurt when you're like rummaging around in a bag of Orgonite and you have little bits of metal poking out the top. It's sharp and it can cut you, and it's just not a nice experience. So I'm taking my chopstick and I'm poking them all so that they're under the surface. Now these will begin to harden at about 25 minutes. They'll be really hot, and once they get really hot, you can pop them out of the mold and they'll be ready to go. So we're going to set this aside for now. We're going to come back to Elizabeth's piece, and I'm going to use a little piece of selenite just to test the surface tension of this to see if we've got any sort of solidification going on, and it looks like we don't. So I'm going to go ahead and pause the video at this point. We'll come back.